City University Television presents the American Theater Wing Seminars. Working in the theater. This seminar, play script, director.
A very warm welcome to the American Theater Wing's Working in the Theater Seminars. They are now in their 24th year, and they are coming to you from the Graduate Center of the City University of New York. These seminars offer a rare opportunity to hear a discussion of the realities of working in the theater, from the performers, the producers, the playwrights, the designers, the directors, the casting directors, the press agents, union and guild leaders, and the many other theater professionals to whom these unique seminars have become so important. The Wing is more than the Tony Awards, which are given for distinguished achievement in the theater. We are an organization whose year-round programs are dedicated to serving the theater and the community with the goal of developing new audiences. To achieve that goal, we have created audience development programs for students, such as Introduction to Broadway, which began 5 years ago and has enabled over 60,000 New York City high school students to attend a Broadway show, many for the first time. And through our newest program, Theater in School, theater professionals like those you will meet today go directly into classrooms to work with and talk to students about working in the theater. And in addition, we have our hospital program, which dates back to World War II and the Stage Door Canteen. And through it, volunteer performers from Broadway, off-Broadway, and the cabaret world have entertained more than 75,000 patients in nursing homes, veterans hospitals, children's wards, and AIDS centers in the New York area, bringing the magic of theater to those who cannot get to the theater itself. We are indeed proud of the work we do. We're happy to have a wonderful working relationship with the theatrical community and are grateful to everyone who makes what the American Theater Wing does possible. We hope that you will enjoy and learn from today's seminar. And now, let me introduce today's panel, which is on the playwright, director, and choreographer. Walter Bobbie of Chicago, Ron Lagomarsino of Last Night at Ballyhoo, Gene Sachs of Barrymore, George White, president of the Eugene O'Neill Theater Center, and our esteemed director, both here and abroad, and Brendan Gill, author, critic in residence at the New Yorker Magazine, and on the board of directors of the American Theater Wing. Alfred Uhry of The Last Ballyhoo, Wayne Cilento of Dream, and Scott Elliott of Present Laughter. And now I shall turn it over to our moderators, and they will immediately begin to dig out all the information that's on that panel today. George.
Okay. Yes, I will try to mine the gold here, being a gold digger. But I'm going to start, I think, since we have so many live playwrights and obviously live directors, I would like to start as talking with Scott, since you are today representing the Dead Playwrights Society here, but with Present Laughter, and Three Sisters. And Scott you've done a great deal with living playwrights. Do you talk about the ghosts on your shoulder a little bit, and then we'll go the other way. But I wanted you to address that. It's a different take.
It's different. Well, you're always kind of trying to serve the playwright as best as you can. But on the other hand, as well, like Isabel said before about creating a new audience, bringing a new audience to the theater, I think it's a responsibility of a director of a dead playwright's work to make the play relevant to speak to, a contemporary audience, which, rather than creating a kind of, a museum piece that, is the same thing that we've seen, 8,000 times. I mean, Present Laughter has been done, many times in New York, I think, and also across the country. And I saw it as my job to make it a little bit more relevant for a contemporary audience and for young people also who are going to come see it, who are going to be able to understand exactly what made Noel Coward tick. And because that particular play he wrote about himself, for himself, and all of his friends, I kind of delved into his life and spoke with his friends about him and tried to bring to the surface a little bit more of the subtext of what the play's kind of really about.
But you did have a collaborator in the sense with Lanford Wilson with Three Sisters.
Yes, well, that was really great. I did have a collaborator, and it was great to have him on board because he understands the material so beautifully, and he, because he has worked on it for so long, and he's really a fantastic man and was wonderful to have around in the process. And he also helped, because the translation was already done when we began, he was there every day during rehearsals helping me to just, refine it a little bit and make it just a little bit more, relevant. When, when the Russians spoke their slang, we turned it into American slang. We tried to make it so that people who, kids who came, a lot of young people came to see Three Sisters because of the people who were in it, and they dug it because they understood, what Chekhov was trying to say, and that's kind of my goal, in working in the theater.
They dug it in a Chekhovian sense.
Yeah, they dug it in. Yeah, they understood it. I mean, it's very difficult to to go to the theater. I mean, I find it difficult to go to the theater and listen to people speaking, so colloquially and in ways. I mean, especially when it's not written in English, it's written in another language, and it just makes it a little bit more relevant and easy to kind of stomach when you can understand what people are saying, as opposed to people speaking in kind of highfalutin language that we just don't speak anymore.
What about this word relevant, which we are using the word relevant?
Yeah.
This isn't true in the other arts. There's no possible way, plainly, in painting to make a painting that is a classic painting relevant to us. We assume that we can establish a relationship to it as a classic work that we understand over the centuries. Same thing with poetry, same thing with sculpture and anything else. But only in drama can we start fiddling.
Well, but that's true. But a painting is just a one-time thing. You don't recreate a painting 8 times a week, or you don't keep doing the same painting over and over again.
No, I understand why it happens.
But an interesting thing.
Dangerous.
It is dangerous, but danger is good.
Don't you think that most of the Shakespearean attempts, or the attempts to make Shakespeare relevant by making it modern dress or 18th century dress, or toying with Shakespeare, playing with Shakespeare, is a radically dangerous thing to do. He's relevant.
But what's radically dangerous about it if there are people who can relate to it, who going to see it, in its purest form would not be able to relate to it. So I think that there's an audience for both. And in thinking about a painter, because a painting is created in a one-shot deal, but there are painters nowadays. I mean, let's say some painter comes along and has an idea and he paints the ocean and he paints it red, right? And then somebody comes along and says, oh well, the ocean's blue, and you should not paint the ocean red. I mean, why is that not okay? And some people would see great beauty in that. So, that's...
Well, I want to pick up on this, on relevance to a degree, and talk to Jean about the relevance of Barrymore, because here, as opposed to a dead playwright, we've got a dead actor. This is not a down show, you understand. But what intrigued you about, because of course we had a Barrymore show a year ago, and was it the play, was it the character, how did...
The work, getting a job.
There you are, fair enough.
I thought it was, the main thing that intrigued me about it was Christopher Plummer. That was the main thing. And I've known him for years and never worked with him. And one day I went backstage to see his performance in the Pinter play with Jason Robards. And I admired his performance in that so much. And he said, let's do something together. And I said, fine. And then the following week, he called me about Barrymore and said he wanted to do it. And they sent me the play. And I thought, well, it's got a couple of jokes in it. And it seems... I think we could make it amusing with him. In 1935, I think, I drew a picture of Barrymore, in pencil, worked over his nose for hours and hours. I admired that nose so much. And he, when we did the play, I suddenly remembered it. And I looked through my files and my papers, and I found this picture of Barrymore, which was pretty good. I was better at age 13 than I am now. And I gave it to Chris. And we talked a lot about how when we were young, Barrymore was like Brando was to the next generation. And I suppose every generation has its glamorous star actor who influences everybody. So that was part of the attraction of Barrymore. And having the right actor to play it is 90% of the success of something like that.
And of course, one of the interesting things that you evolved in this is the continuous contrast between the comedy, the lines, the funny lines, the one-liners, and the fact that Barrymore's life is a tragic one in every respect. And people came at the end of his life to watch him half dying on stage. They counted on his being drunk, but they really, in their hearts, and to some extent, wanted him to be dying the way they went to see Judy Garland in her late years for that. And to me, I was just puzzled how in the world you could bring off both comedy and the intrinsic tragedy that we knew that was there. And so Plummer is a classic actor. He's a great actor. And the fact is that an actor like that has a hard time finding employment nowadays.
I wanted to go to Wayne a little bit because, again, we're dealing with Johnny Mercer, who is no longer with us. I just thought of that. But anyway, but more than that, you know, here as a choreographer, first of all, that is, in a sense, a really unique talent to be a choreographer. So we could talk a little bit, I'd like you to talk about how you got going in the business, which we do on these conversations. But also, you are given a body of work of Johnny Mercer's work, and you almost become, almost more than anybody, you're a choreographer, but in the case of Dream, you really are a playwright in a funny way. You really are the creative force beyond that, and of course you relate to the direction and all of that. Right. Would you talk a little bit about that, and what inspired you, first how you started, and how that easily segued or didn't segue into doing Dream, and what your inspiration was for each number, or the numbers?
The choreography thing kind of fell into place when I was in chorus line, and we all got acknowledged as dancers, performers, and I started doing choreography for commercials. That's how I started as a choreographer. Never wanted to be a choreographer. Wanted to be Gene Kelly or Fred Astaire or one of those people. I wanted to go back to Hollywood and do that. And I thought, oh, that's fun. You know, sure, I'll choreograph.
Well, now, you had two great mentors. What I'm hearing is Michael Bennett and Bob Fosse.
Right.
I imagine both very different characters to deal with.
Incredible forces and influences in my life that now I realize how much they influenced me and how much I learned by being in their company. I wished I did another show with Michael. I did 2 shows with Bob, and it was really interesting. The 2 of them had a scope of how everything moved. It wasn't about the choreography. It was about how everything was choreographed. The stage was choreographed, primarily, mostly for Michael. Michael wasn't interested in the specific dance steps. He had a core of people, and I was one of them. It was the Donna McKechnie's and Bjork Lees and myself and Tommy Walsh. We would be the core of people that went into the room that came up with vocabulary, dance steps. And he would come in and he would edit. And he would say, well, do 2 of those, 1 of those, put that together, I'll come back. And then we would do combination. He'd come back, and if he liked it, he would bring it into the other room and teach the dancers. And then choreograph the room. So that was Michael. Then Bob was the other extreme was Bob, you know, he would rehearse us until we were blue in the face about one little hand wrist you know, and everyone had to be very specific. And it was about the simplicity that was exciting, and that he did every one of his steps. He wouldn't have a core of people doing steps. And I feel like I'm a little bit like that. Well, a lot like that. I really need
to that.
I really
later.
need to do the steps and feel it before I can put it out there.
Why were you going to have a nervous breakdown, you said? You said you were afraid of having a nervous breakdown.
Well, Chorus Line was pretty intense. You know, it was a big therapy session. No one knew that. You know, it was all about our lives, and we did 30-something hours of tapes, and what we did was we sat in a circle and we talked about ourselves and where we came from and who was having breakdowns and who had family problems and who hated their mother and their father, and that's how we came up with this story. And then it was like a head trip. It was like, okay, Wayne, no one will believe that you're married and you have a kid. I'm going to give it to him. Let's give it to the guy down the line. Well, wait a minute, Michael, that is my story. Well, sorry, you can't do that. You're going to do, I can do that. Well, I don't have a sister, and I never took a tap class. But you're going to do it anyway. Don't worry about it. And I was always, well, wait a minute. You know,
We've got the playwright and the directors here.
Yeah.
I think that they might be writing this script right now.
Yeah.
But George had something. Go on.
Well, I wanted now to get to, you know, Ron and Alfred, now that, since you were the live ones, and Walter too, I want to know about, you know, first of all, are you, how autobiographical is your play?
Well,
That's last
everybody
night
in
of
it.
it.
You mean, is everybody in it me? Yeah, everybody in it is me. But
Okay.
I was not, well, I was around in 1939, but not much, so I don't really know. It's not autobiographical at all, except it is my parents' love story. That part is really true. My mother really did go to Wellesley, and my father really did work for my grandfather, and they really did have a fight on New Year's Eve, and they really did make up on the train. I mean, that's all true. So that was fun for me to write. And the fact that I'm Southern and I'm Jewish, and they're Southern and they're Jewish, and when I was a little boy, I used to want to write novels, like my character Lala, and I would make, I think, Though Your Sins Be Scarlet was a title that I may have scribbled in a notebook when I was embarrassingly, like in the 11 years old. I may have done things like that, I don't know. I have 4 daughters, and I seem to be around women a lot, so I always write a lot of women because that's what I hear in my head.
Well, now,
They were getting closer and closer to autobiography, if I ever heard it.
How did you two link up
course.
on this one?
How did we link up? Well, we linked up because we had linked up previously on Driving Miss Daisy.
Right.
I think one thing that happened on this play that didn't happen nearly as much on Daisy is that I think this play, yes, it did draw from your family, but you know your family so well that sometimes you would write, you would underwrite, and you're the first one to admit that
I leave a lot of stuff out.
You leave a lot of stuff out, and I said, well, what is the story here? I mean, the whole thing with Uncle Adolf and being, you know, living in this house with his sister and sister-in-law, and you know, why is he not married? And Alfred would say, well, he probably had some you know, short-term things where it didn't happen, but and then he'd say, oh, I know, it was probably this, and I said, well, that's interesting, that you should write, and that became the girl on the streetcar.
One thing wonderful about working in the theater is you can write a play, and 3 weeks later, you can have people sit around and read it. If you write a movie, it's probably going to be 11 years until something happens, and by then you've forgotten what you were doing in the first place. But with this play, it was still hot out of the computer. There was a reading, and I listened to it, and Ron listened to it, and I finally got, it's very important for a playwright to be able to listen to the reading and not be so frightened that you can't hear anything. You just got to make yourself do that. It's really hard. But if you just, and you start, everybody's looking at me, you know, it's like nightmare time. But if you just listen, and you can listen, you can feel, I'm sure directors can feel, you can feel when it starts to go down. And you can feel when it's right. And so we got a lot of that reading, and then about a month later, it seems to be we had another reading, a couple of months later.
Can we stop right here now and then use that afterwards so that we can ask Walter how he did more into less?
Scissors.
Yes, talk to that, though, because that's it's suddenly a whole new show, in a sense.
I was very interested in what Scott was saying, because I've had the experience over at Encores at City Center. When we started to do the projects over there, we realized, since the focus was the score, that it would be to our advantage to cut the scripts. And in terms of working with the estates, sometimes when you find that you're happier when you have a living writer, as we did with John and Fred, because they understand the process. They actually write, they get up and they create work, and they're not afraid, as Alfred isn't, of change, of doing 3 new pages every day, whereas estates can sometimes say, this is perfect, you cannot touch it, you cannot touch a word, and that becomes really kind of a challenge. So we found at Encores that we would stay away from overly protective estates in our initial journeys, because, in fact, the first thing we did was Bach and Harnick's Fiorello, and John Weidman came in and lovingly edited his dad's own script. So we began to introduce the idea that we were not out to destroy these pieces, but to focus the score. But as we began to do more and more of them, we realized that people get it faster. And when we would get to things like Call Me Madam, this, it was a very, very skillful book by Lindsay and Krauss, but people weren't patient with sitting through, especially in this form, a lot of this terrific dialogue. So we would cut at least 1/3 of the scripts over at Encores. And I began to see
excuse me, just to leave, would you explain very well what Encores is?
Oh, Encores is a project at City Center where we do great American musicals. We do American music. We think they're great. They're great American musicals in concert. And the focus has been to showcase what we think is important American writing that perhaps has not been seen in a long time, and perhaps is unlikely to be seen. When it costs $5 million to revive a Broadway musical, we're unlikely to see some of the lesser works or less popular works of Lesser or Kern or Gershwin or Berlin or all these great writers, and it's become, we don't have the tradition that the opera has, where we keep everything in repertoire, So it's been great to pass along a body of work to a new generation of people. There's no other way for them to see it, with original orchestrations and a full chorus and the way it was heard originally. I know Alfred and I have both worked up at Goodspeed, where there's this great library theater, to actually hear the orchestrations, or the full orchestrations of Russell Bennett or Hans Bialik. It's been thrilling for us. At any rate, Encores does that, and we trim the scripts considerably. And when we chose to do, by the time we got to, I guess, our 3rd season, and we chose to do Chicago, we told John and Fred that we would like to trim the script. And we brought along Tom Thompson, who they had great confidence in, because Tom wrote this book for Steel Pier and As the World Goes Round, so he felt very cared for in the way that we would red pencil this text. And we did, we worked on it and the reason being, not because we wanted to chop away, but we felt that the audience just gets it faster. After 10 years of sung-through musicals, the way musicals behave has seemed different. I know Wayne has experienced it with his basically sung-through show as well. So we did it, and we sent it to Fred Ebb, and he said, "What did you cut?" and that was probably the most generous and wonderful thing he could have said, because he didn't feel that he lost anything dramaturgically, narratively, emotionally. And we felt that the script just felt leaner and skinnier and more modern, and that was the reason we did it. We did it because it seemed the best way to focus what we thought was a very down-and-one, entertaining piece that wanted to behave like an entertainment, to seduce you into the story by entertaining you, so that you didn't know how far into the story you were until you had seen 5 or 6 songs. It sort of behaves like a review, and then suddenly you go, "Oh my God, there's a story going on here," which is, I think, what's so extraordinary about the writing of this piece. I just think it's... That's what I think is extraordinary about the directing of it as well, though, because it does exactly what you say, and that there's a lot of craft that goes into making something that is as complex an idea of what you're talking about, but it seems so completely effortless when you're watching it in the theater. I mean, it's really extraordinary.
Now, that business of getting things faster is so interesting because it seems to be true, and it seems to have been a consequence and part of television, when they used to have 30-second commercials, then 15, and it turned out you get the message very quickly indeed. So with the dead playwrights, like with Chekhov or something, not only the question of relevance, but the question of getting things faster nowadays. Right. And with Chekhov, that's a particularly difficult thing, because part of the effect of Chekhov is not getting things faster, but moving into...
That's a terrible idea, to get Chekhov faster.
No, you can't do that. I'm saying you can't do that. But nevertheless, it's true for living playwrights that people do get things faster.
You have to trick them into listening.
Yeah.
You know, it's because their attention span is so...
And it's all image.
So much as faster. I think that almost everything can benefit from editing and cutting. And people are so loath to do that of their own work. And
I would rather cut my work than Chekhov. I mean...
You know, I think it's hard to cut something like, you can't really cut Chekhov.
Very
but
difficult.
like, I worked with Arthur Miller, and he was totally great about cutting his own work. I had no problem with him. We sat down around a table with the cast, and I just said, let's get rid of that. And he's like, okay.
I think most of us want to cut. I think we're happy to.
But I think it's trust too. I mean, it depends. You know, I think trust.
That's a great word.
You know, it's kind of about trust. If you have a good, you know, like if you have a good relationship with your director, and you know, there has to be some sort of, the director's there kind of like, you know, just as an objective eye, you know, for the play. And if you have a good relationship, I've never had a problem with living playwrights and like cutting and rearranging things. I've always.
What Walter didn't say is that he's been doing musicals probably over half his life, and he knows musicals, he knows the feelings of a musical backwards and forwards, and I don't think he could have done what he did if he wasn't that totally secure about the way a musical is supposed to go. I don't think anybody with another background could have done what you did with Chicago.
I love musicals, clearly.
Yeah,
and also the
way you understand them.
The way musicals work is very different than the way a play works. You know, the play is the voice of an author. A musical is the voice of several writers. You know, the composer, the lyricist, the playwright. And in the case, and more, I think, in the last 30 years, the voice of the director, choreographer. I mean, one of the reasons we wanted to do Chicago at Encores is because we've been focusing writers. And it seemed to me that once you got to the 70s and the great director choreographers, and you got to Hal Prince and all those wonderful conceptual musicals, and Bennett and Fosse and Champion, one of the great pieces of writing, if you will, was choreography. And we wanted to show a generation what the great Mr. Fosse had done, that there was indeed a vocabulary that was unique as Chekhov's writing is. There was a dance vocabulary that was the singular evolution of a very dynamic artist, and to put that forth as one of the ways in which the story was told. Not just stuff you did between the words, but indeed the way the whole tone of the piece was communicated. Fosse is, in his silence, one of the authors of this piece, although he did participate in the book. So it was our goal to put forth choreography as theater vocabulary in the musical. Now, when you're dealing with that, and as Wayne said, where you deal with the Bennett, where he wanted to see how the whole stage moved, the sets, that's a very different dance than finding the voice of Chekhov or Shakespeare or Wilde or Uhry. That's a different process, and so.
What were you looking for in casting? Someone who had been there, who had seen it, or
with our show? Well, you mean specifically Chicago?
Yes.
When we did Chicago, I immediately called. I started to do Chicago. I immediately called Anne Reinking. Of course, she brings that legacy onto the stage, and frankly, she channels him. I mean, she understands. You know, as Wayne pointed out, how to do that on stage and make 1,600 people pay attention to doing that, and it was Fosse's great gift to make us look at things that we didn't know we wanted to, and make them wildly theatrical. And when we sat down to do it with all of the designers, I decided that we decided that not to make this a Fosse's career, to Fosse the artist. So we began to pull images from throughout his career that I always found compelling, and clearly it was obvious we were going to go to the slouch and the hat and the cigarette and the cane, but I remember seeing ladders on stage for the first time in Pippin, and I thought, gee, it seemed like his invention, you know. I remember the light trough at the top of Pippin, which we used and manipulated into the way we do the courtroom. Cell block tango, I said to Anne, I just want interrogation lamps and chairs. I want to do all that great chair choreography that Fosse did in Cabaret. So we stole from a master. We stole from throughout his career. So we honored his career. I hope that's what we accomplished, so that you really can't tell on a good day where Fosse stopped and I started and Anne finished. You know, that it was really, we had a collaboration with the Dead Man, but it was glorious for us.
Gene, you've done both musicals and plays, and we were just. Would you pick up on what they were saying about the different approaches?
Well, I was just thinking, first of all, on the subject of brevity. You know, we've come from, in Shakespeare's day, it would go on all day, the show. People would leave, come back, eat. They had nothing else to do, I guess. But then they had 5-act plays. Then we were reduced to 4-act plays, and then 3-act plays. Well, you can't find a 3-act play anymore. I mean, then it was now it's 2 acts. I think it should be 1 act. I think most authors, all due respect, today have no more to say than 1 act.
Well,
I don't know. Most of the plays that I've attended, I say, why is there a 2nd act? I know everything I had to know now in 1 act. I may be speaking out of turn, but I'll do it anyway. I saw Candide last night. Well, now, I saw it in 1956, I think, or not, no, I saw it in, 56, and there was another one in 72, and I always remembered it as wonderfully imaginative, great score and so forth, but I always remembered it as getting to be rather boring after a while. And last night I saw it and I thought, you know, it could have been done in 1 act. I don't know why we get the picture. We get the idea. And I think that's what you did. And I was going to ask you, what was the original book? I saw the original Chicago, and I remember the book as being something that seemed to me to drag it down. And when I saw your thing at Encores, I said, my God, it's a revelation. It tells the whole story, and it's short. I can go out and get in a restaurant before they close. But I think that...
It's a cultural accident how long plays were and what the division was. Private Lives would probably be the greatest comedy in English ever written, except it had to be in 3 acts, and the 2nd act is a total waste of time, and then you go to the 3rd act and complete the circle of the action of the play. But there was no possibility at the time Coward wrote it that it could be allowed to be 2 acts. And it is true now that we do have 1-act plays, without, or at least intermission-less plays, and that people are not discontent with this. People are not discontent to go home early in that. In the old days, commercially, people feared if you're charging such a price, you've got to give them a full evening.
Yes, no,
nonsense.
They're thankful that you let them out. No, as a matter of fact, there are certain things that keep you from reducing it to 1 act because of for instance, in Barrymore, somebody said, why don't you do it in 1 act? It's, you know, it's only an hour and a half. But it was impossible because he has to get into the Richard III makeup and costume. So we have to have an intermission. And that's something that is
But that is the big coup
unavoidable.
de théâtre when we see him coming on completely
Yes.
different. That's what's thrilling.
Yes, that's exciting and a reason for. But I suppose that coming back to television, I suppose we've all been made very impatient. We all, you know, just that clicker in your hand.
Right.
God, it's lethal. I mean, you don't like what 5 seconds, boom. I didn't like it.
Right.
What was it? I don't know, and I don't care. And that's terrible. I mean,
Imagine being able to do that in Broadway, just go from Dream and
yes, go for
Les Mis.
Oh,
Wayne.
okay.
No, I wanted to ask Alfred to reply. This is a playwright. Why do you write in 2 acts?
Well, I think when plays are directed well, they can be as many acts as you want them to be. I really do think that.
But I also think the thing that the collaboration between a director and a choreographer is very important, because I think what Walter has done with Chicago, what I try to do with Dream was, you can tell a story through dancers. And it gets back to Isabel, because dancers do act. They do continue the storyline. They progress the story without getting into very heavy book scenes. You can tell it through lyrics, you can tell it through song and dance. My collaboration with Des McAnuff taught me that with Tommy and How to Succeed. I needed to continue to tell the story. I couldn't stop and just do a dance number because I'm the choreographer and I want to dance now. I had to trick myself into directing the dancers and to keep telling the story, to keep the thing keep moving, so the audience wouldn't get bored and go, ugh, okay, now they're dancing, but everything stopped. They used to do that in old musicals, but I think we've progressed into moving the story along through song and dance.
Part of the story.
Totally being part of the story
unless
and
what
letting
you
them
do is so entertaining that you can stop for it.
But I think what we're talking about is like every element is important. I think that the mandate is it's what makes an actor, the difference between an actor and a star. A star, to me, is somebody that you can't take your eyes off of, because if you do, you're going to miss something.
Yes.
Because every second is worthwhile. And
That's
I think
right.
We were talking about whether we should have a 1-act play, 2 acts, 3, 4, 5, and we were such issues as should the musical numbers contribute to the story, and should we stop for a musical number that is not contributing to the story, but which happens to be good entertainment at the same time. What do we do about these things? We're trying to generalize. And for instance, the other night I went to the Kander and Ebb tribute, and one of the performers was Chita Rivera. And she came out and did a number that had, of course, nothing to do with the tribute, except that Kander and Ebb had written the music. And the song is from Kiss of the Spider Woman. Well, my point is that I could not take my eyes off Chita Rivera. She has such style when she dances, when she sings and dances, such charisma, for want of a better word. She is a real star, and I couldn't see anything else. I didn't want to. I realized later there were about 10 guys dancing with her. Didn't see them at all. She was just mesmerizing. And of course, we know she's not a kid anymore. And that makes it all the more interesting and exciting. But it leads me up in long-winded style to this story that I wanted to tell you. A few years ago, I was, I think, the second night of a show called Tango Argentina, which was at the Hellinger Theater. I always remember a show by what theater it was at. I don't know the year, I don't know whether it was any good or not. But Tango Argentina was, and it was one of those surprise hits. Nobody thought it would amount to anything. It was, after all, a bunch of overweight, middle-aged Buenos Aires working people who belonged to a tango club And they were so expert at it that they decided to do a show, which was wonderful, South American music and so forth. And it got very, very good reviews. And at the end of this was the second night, and after the first act, Julie Stein, who I love dearly and who I think was very brilliant besides being a talented composer, jumped up from his second row seat and dashed up the aisle, and I reached out to greet him and I said, "Julie, hi," and he whirled on me and said, "You see, there are no rules."
Right.
Which is, I think, such an important lesson for us. Right. We don't know. We cannot lay down rules as to should it be a one-act or two-act and so forth. And I expected a bigger laugh, but I
tell you, you didn't get the laugh because everybody was weighing what you said.
Right.
Because what you said really was most important.
Yes.
But and there are rules, and you just to quote you, really, to turn it back, is the talent. Cheetah's talent. There are very few stars anymore.
Yes.
But Cheetah has that quality, and her talent holds you. And the talents of these people, middle-aged, whatever, nobody cared how old they were or what they did.
Right.
They were extremely talented. And the ones that followed, like clones of them, were not.
Right.
So it's talent is the rule that weighs here. And one would think that people like you are so experienced that you would be able to see and recognize talent right away, but not
No, that's
always.
a very good point.
Not always.
Was that true or false? It's very hard to do it, to detect talent like that. It isn't.
The auditioning process is so
It's horrible.
brutal and so oftentimes depressing, and I can't wait to get out of there.
Don't you think that's the hardest work, though, in putting a play
Yeah,
or a show
well, it
together,
is.
is going through the auditioning
That's
process?
why I wish there was a better way of doing it, but it is so important to, when somebody comes in, if actors only could remind themselves more often that the director and the producer really want them to hit a home run. They really want them to do that. But our job is to also make them feel that way and not get them in and out of the room quickly because we're so numb from hearing the same scene, however great the writing is, 200 times.
I think, besides the auditioning process, I think keeping a show at the level of where you want it to be is even more difficult than getting the show up. I find that's the most exhausting experience for me.
How often do you go back?
A lot, because I'm a good father.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like it's my baby, but it's hard. I mean, I wish someone would pay me not to go back because I could see where things go. A lot of stuff happens with performers. They start being needy. They start pushing their performance. They forget about the environment and the situation that they are in and trust that that's enough. And then it starts coming to be individualized for each one of the performers. It's like, okay, I need to be better. They're not responding to me, so they do a little bit more. And what happens is it gets a reverse reaction.
Skews everything.
Right, and the audience pulls back. Instead of taking them into their arms and caressing them, they go, too much. It's just too much. Relax.
What happens with a straight show with someone
Yes.
like Frank Langella?
And Three Sisters, too, because you're getting into very
Right.
heavy-duty stuff there.
When you're dealing with a star.
Right. Well, I like to, I'm not from the intimidation school. Sorry to say. Because I'm still kind of learning on the job. I learn from every company that I work with, and I try to, in the rehearsal process, develop an ensemble in a way. I kind of start from, scratch with everybody, and I like to let everybody feel, all the actors feel as though they have as much input into the work that I do, and that they own, part of the show just like I own part of the show, and that I spend a lot of time kind of helping everybody just kind of come together into a similar way of thinking about things, and I try to set up a looser structure from which they can work, because I feel, because I was an actor, and when I was doing shows 8 times a week, I hated it because I felt that I had to deliver the same thing every night, and if I didn't please this actor, that they would get mad, and if I didn't please that actor, then they would get mad, and it was always this and that. So I try to create an environment where people can continue to work 8 times a week and try new things, and come in, if they have an idea, to come in and try it, even months into the run, and to okay it with the stage manager if they want to talk to me, call me or whatever, to just give them a chance to continue to feel as though they're working and developing. It's easier in a play than in a musical, because in a musical you have to do so many things to the beat, but in a play, they're living, especially in Three Sisters, something like Three Sisters, where it filled out so much as the run went along, and we all knew that. It was Chekhov. It was, we didn't have a very long rehearsal period because we just can't afford it in New York to rehearse that long. But as every time I went back, they would say, "Give me notes, more notes, more notes," and I would say, "You know what? I'm not giving you notes because you're finding what the play's open already, and you're finding who the person is. And if you veer off track, I'll let you know. But I'm not going to sit there and take 20 pages of notes and come back and say, don't pick up the glass when you say blah, 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 and don't, this when you that. It's just not my thing. I really want people to feel as though they're growing in it. And it was the same with Present Laughter. And, every time I check in at Present Laughter, they would find certain things that I thought, were helpful in telling the story, and some things that weren't helpful in telling the story. And I would just reason as to why, I thought this element was not working and why that element helped. And, that's how it happened. And, somebody like Frank, he grew. Every time I went to see the play, he was, working on something different. Mm-hmm. And to me, that's, what acting's really all about. It can't be about being chess pieces on a board and following, just what I say. Yeah. I mean, of course, I want it to be what I want it to be, but at the same time, I'm willing to compromise on the side of the actor because I really do believe that they know. Uh-huh. They're experiencing it every night. They're in it. They're working with those partners. And if there's something that I have imposed on them that isn't, that, from my point of view is working, and from their point of view isn't working, I have to err on their side and try to find a way to help them, so...
Would that satisfy you as a playwright?
Yeah, I was just thinking, listening to that. When I work with people like Dana, for instance, there was a couple of lines in previews, and in Atlanta that Dana wasn't happy with. And it was getting a laugh where we didn't want to laugh. And Ron said, well, maybe we tried to work around it. But Dana is very respectful of text, and she wouldn't just not say a line. I once worked at Goodspeed with somebody who changed all the lines all the time, who said that she thought it would get a laugh that way. I mean, it was I don't remember what I don't remember what it was, but I had sat up there and sat up all night writing these stupid jokes, and at least I wanted to hear if they were going to play.
Right. Well, I never let anybody stray from the text. That's the one thing that I'm very, yes. I never do that, because I really do believe that it's important that, the writer be heard, for whatever,
Right.
That's
what kind of a
really
director are you?
I say let the writer hang himself.
The rope merchant.
I think when you go back, it is a very tough thing. I too was an actor, and to get that same sense of urgency that is necessary to get the audience to really be interested is so difficult, because you wear it out. You wear out what you're playing. I find that the best thing, perhaps, is to come back and just have a talk and try to stimulate the cast through a talk, which they generally respond to beautifully, because they want to be cared for. They want you to still be interested, and as a matter of fact, they get very upset when you don't come back.
That's right. Absolutely.
And they feel neglected, and it's a lonely, as great as it is to be in a hit, it's a lonely life to, after all the famous people have been in to see it.
Right.
And you got to deal with the average audience and the bus tours.
Right. But it's a double-edged sword, because I think on one hand, like last night, they all had, like thick notebooks out because they wanted to hear from me, and yet they were, I know that, they were thinking like, oh, I hope he doesn't ask me to take out that thing that I'm so in love with doing right now that gets that big response.
Absolutely.
And so but going into it, I knew that, okay, I'm going to have to, like, find things that they're doing that are wonderful, that are new, and find some things that, you know, need yanking.
Pull back.
Yeah. And, you know, it last night, fortunately, it was easy because the growth was wonderful, and but it's May in New York, so it's a very electric time. But for me, when you were talking about how when actors, Wayne, when you said that actors, after a time, and dancers, feel they have to embroider things because they think they want to get that response more and more and more, and they feed off the laughter or whatever. Right. For me, what happened last night was there was a scene where all the individual moments were terrific, but they had forgotten what the scene was about.
Right. Well, because everyone's taking care of themselves.
Each beat, you know, the laugh would come, or the this and that, and to the naked eye, it would seem fine, but there was no thrust to the reason why I'm doing this is because I want that.
Right.
There was no,
That,
you know, that was
absolutely.
happening.
I often like to talk about, like, you know, like I said, you know, I mean, if this is only my own way, I don't know if it's right or wrong, but I often like to talk about what the event of the scene is, you know, so that, you know, that's all you have to do is to remind people what the event, you know, what exactly the scene is about. And so you don't have to go back and give all of these specific things about doing this and that, but just give a little reminder that, you know, this scene is about, you know, you seducing you, or, you know, whatever, and just remember that, and then they know in their own heart of hearts that, you know, some of the things that they're doing might have strayed, because I really do think when they feel like they own it, it seems more alive to me and lived in.
Well, now that's
I
going
also
back to
think,
trust. Go on.
Not just that because I was an actor as well, and I think there's a part in the process where you really do get a deeper and deeper understanding of the role, and then sometimes you wear out that well. And I think what happens is the director often understands the play better, but there comes a point where the actor understands his role better than the director ever will.
Yeah, right.
Because it is his daily journey, you know.
It becomes nuanced as it goes along.
Sometimes I go back and just try to remind the company of what the story is that they're rich, that they're participating in, and that changes things. We had a note session not too long ago where there was one scene, all the decisions. It was richer, it was more layered, it was dynamic, but they both figured out how to say their lines, and they had just gotten to that moment where they stopped listening to each other. And I said, would you just listen to each other tonight in that scene? None of the readings changed, and it was on fire all over again. They just forgot that they were supposed to listen.
Yeah, right.
You know? And so the same intentions, the same line readings had a spontaneity, and I think it's director's job sometimes to just go and remind people what the story is.
We have some questions here.
Oh, sure,
Would you mind answering them? Would you
Hi, my
tell
name
who
is
you are?
My name is Lisa, and you talked a little bit about the playwright-director collaboration. Well, what about the choreographer-director collaboration? And I guess Wayne and Walter, you can fight it out.
I think it's very important. I mean, I think a collaboration between a director and choreographer you should not know where one picked up and the other one left off. I mean, I think you throw your egos away and you go, okay, do you need me to help you block that scene so I can get into the musical number? So it's all seamless, and you go, yes. And then the director comes inside and he goes, well, why are they doing that dance step? Well, I don't know. I guess because they're, you know. And it's like that dance step needs to continue telling the story. And if you achieve that, then you have a great collaboration. If you don't, and you see the choreographer stick out or the director stick out, I don't think it's successful.
You know, I think my feeling with anybody in a collaboration, whether it's the designer or the choreographer, I just say, make me look good.
That's right.
But I think it's important in the collaboration to decide what the song and what the dance is about.
What
that
the
you would
story is.
examine it the way you examine any scene, and what the story is, and what the narrative is, and where one has the idea and one does. It doesn't matter who comes up with the idea, as long as you know that you have put that scene to a beat, and in some theatrical way on the stage. That's what's...
Well, I think all dances are scenes, so you have to treat it as a scene, and it's a continuation of the speaking scene, goes into the singing, dancing scene, that goes into the next scene, so it's all telling the same story.
Isn't that what it's supposed to do, is to move the story along?
I feel like today it does. I think in the older shows like Oklahoma, everything stopped, they did a 7-minute ballet, and then went on. I don't think we have the luxury anymore to do that.
We have another question here.
My name is Shlomo Gewirtz. I'm a playwright, and my question is addressed to any or all of the directors. What's the one emotion you most enjoy triggering in your audience, and how successful or unsuccessful have you been so far?
It's a tough question because everything, you know, every play, you know, kind of incorporates so many levels of emotion that it's hard to pinpoint, you know, just one. You know, if it's a good play, it kind of runs the gamut of different emotions, and
exactly.
you can hope to hit as many as you
aren't there
possibly
different
can.
emotions?
Exactly. I mean,
It's not one emotion.
If you're rehearsing a play for 4 weeks and you are excited about the prospects and you bring the audience in, every moment of the play, I'm hoping that they're going to be here. I want them to be exactly where I want them to be for the 2 hours and a half.
If they're involved, as you try to involve yourself as a director, and you watch them and feel their presence, and you know whether they are also involved in following what you had intended them to follow through the actors. That's what you want, so that it incorporates all the emotions that you put in the play.
What a full and wonderful, wonderful panel this has been. And I feel that I would like to have you go on and on. I wish you could, because there's so much I've learned and so much I could learn from all of you, as all of us can. But the time is up, and I have to say that this is the finish of the American Theater Wing seminar on working in the theater, and it's a playwright, director, choreographer panel, and it's coming to you from the Graduate Center of the City University of New York. And today's panel has been absolutely extraordinary in their generous sharing of knowledge and thoughtfulness in telling us what it is to work in the theater. Thank you so much for being here.